Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is August 15th, not October, August 15th. We are 8 days out from college football being fully underway, and we got a lot to get to. We obviously have gone through all of my predictions for all of the big-time conferences. We'll do a little bit of an update on that on Monday once we get into my playoff predictions and all of that craziness that is going to be really hard to figure out. But I want to take a little bit of a hiatus because there's a number of things that I want to talk about before we get into all of the craziness around everything else, around the playoff and Heisman and all of that fun stuff that I will do on Monday. Today I got to get into some fall camp intel, and we got some quarterback battles that have been decided. Obviously, we're going to start down there in Tuscaloosa. Ty Simpson has won the job over there at Alabama. He will be the starting quarterback for the Crimson Tide going into this season. It started to be a little bit more expected as we get a little bit further down the road. Seemed like he started to separate during fall camp. I picked Austin Mack to win this one early on. I thought throughout spring and then into fall camp, him and his comfortability with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb especially was going to help him get the edge there. But the way that I see it is if you beat out the guy that I thought was going to win it, I got to feel pretty confident in this guy. Kalen DeBoer knows exactly what he's doing with quarterbacks, not super worried about any decision that he's going to make there. So at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a very solid quarterback. The reality of Kalen DeBoer's offense is if you can hit your spots on time and on target, you're going to throw for about 4,000 yards. You're going to do some really incredible things during your year, and I think Ty Simpson has that ability. I understand he's kind of been talked down a little bit, but this was a former 5-star that has all the talent in the world. So although there has been a little bit of talk, and the whole he didn't beat out Jalen Milroe, could he really be that good? I totally understand that argument, and I get where it's coming from. I think we kind of underestimate the tightrope that Kalen DeBoer had to walk last year when you're talking about Nick Saban moving on, a number of guys leaving the portal, one guy coming back in Caden Proctor in this spring portal, and now you have to kind of just keep this thing together. And Jalen Milroe was the leader of that team, point blank period. It's the same argument that I've made a number of times when we're talking about Arch Manning versus Quinn Ewers last year at Texas. That was Quinn Ewers' team. And if you bench Quinn Ewers, I think you have a couple of guys in that locker room that are not too happy. Over at Alabama, it was even more dire. You're in a position where if you bench Jalen Milroe and these guys are not too happy about that decision, you're going to find out in a hurry, and you're going to find out with guys leaving your program, not just guys being upset at practice or not putting in full effort. It's going to be guys leaving your program, and then you're in a much worse spot going into this year than obviously they are now with a number of guys coming back in Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson and a number of guys that probably could have portaled out that found their way back like Jeremy Bernard or a possible Ryan Williams. I don't think he was going anywhere, but that was obviously something that he could have done if he very well wanted to. That was Jalen Milroe's team, and benching him I think could have really affected the future of this program. He decided he was going to ride it out with Jalen Milroe the rest of the year. I don't think it was a bad decision. I think Ty Simpson's a really good quarterback, and maybe if you gave Kalen DeBoer some truth serum and told him, or asked him who he would have had if everything was equal, maybe he would have said Ty Simpson. I don't really know. That's definitely up for debate, but I don't think the whole, well, he didn't beat out Jalen Milroe, he can't be a good quarterback thing is a very good argument for a number of reasons, mainly because I think that guy was just so important to that team, and Kalen DeBoer was walking a little bit of a tightrope around that team last year just in terms of not being able to be as assertive as he might like to and make some of the aggressive decisions that he would have liked to. Moving up to Boston College, actually sticking with Alabama just a little bit, the Alabama transfer Dylan Lonergan has won the job over there at Boston College over Grayson James. I think this is the perfect fit for Bill O'Brien's offense, and I don't know if it'll explode this year. I don't necessarily think Boston College is going to be an absolute force this year. Love Lewis Bond. I think they could do some fun stuff this year, no doubt about it, especially with Lonergan at quarterback, but I do think in 2026 he could really put something special together, and maybe this is a dark horse team in the ACC. Maybe they are this year. Maybe I'm overlooking them just a little bit too much right now, but I really do think he could have kind of a Eli Holstein year from last year where plays really good football. Hopefully the injury is not part of that, but plays really good football, shines in some certain moments, and you go into the next year thinking, this might be one of the best quarterbacks in the entire conference. Very talented kid that came from about 20 minutes from me, actually, up there at Brookwood High School. Went over to Alabama, was stuck in a ridiculous quarterback room, and has officially found his way elsewhere with a number of other former Alabama players getting starting roles all over the country this year. Over to Notre Dame, Kenny Minchey might win this job. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy because I thought CJ Carr was kind of going to run away with it, if I'm being totally honest. I thought his passing ability was going to take him over the edge. I maybe still think he is one of the more talented quarterbacks they've had there in quite some time. I thought this was going to be his job, but it sounds like Kenny Minchey is putting up a very, very good fight, maybe even leading in this one. Right now, going into their second scrimmage, I believe tomorrow, that'll decide a lot. There's no doubt about that. One thing we do know about Mike Denbrock, he loves mobile quarterbacks, and it's not to say that CJ Carr is a statue and he absolutely can't move. Kenny Minchey is pretty special with his feet, and I think it's one of those things where do you want to add that factor to the offense? I think regardless of whether or not it's Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr, because CJ Carr could still very well win this job, I think Kenny Minchey is going to play a role in this offense, whether that's red zone pieces or fourth down or short third downs, whatever that looks like. You can't really leave a piece of that offense off the field that could be so important to you. You know, those read options are hugely helpful. They were a year ago with Riley Leonard. If you can unlock that with Kenny Minchey this year, regardless of if he's the starter or not, I think you're going to take advantage of that. And I tend to believe that he's going to win the starting job now. I would have said CJ Carr pretty much every time you asked me up until now. It sounds like Kenny Minchey might just bring a little bit to the table that CJ Carr doesn't quite. And if they're taking care of the ball the same amount in the pass game, I don't see why you wouldn't go with the guy that brings a little dynamic in the run game. So that'll be something to watch. Definitely still very much up for debate. I believe they have 2 more scrimmages to go there, but I think this weekend's going to have a lot to do with who we see in week 1 against Miami. And then Ohio State. It sounds like Julian Sayin might start to inch ahead in this competition finally. I think everyone's kind of been waiting on that moment because this was the presumed starter. Lincoln Kienholz is a very talented kid, another guy kind of like Kenny Minchey, a little bit more running ability, so we could see him regardless of if Julian Sayin is the starter or he's the starter, but I do think it's going to be one of those things like the Notre Dame battle that this scrimmage this weekend is going to do a lot to decide this one. You know, if Julian Sayin comes out there and has a great performance and outplays Lincoln Kienholz, I think it's pretty comfortably his job at that point. If Lincoln Kienholz comes out there and plays really, really comfortably and really kind of takes the job back, that's very much on the table as well. So it's going to be awesome to watch this develop. I think it's one of the more interesting topics of conversation, and Notre Dame and Ohio State don't know who their quarterback is, and they have big-time matchups in week 1. It's going to be fascinating to watch those develop, and we might just know by Monday who those 2 quarterbacks are. If we do, we will definitely talk about that then. Moving forward to more general stuff, Nico Iamaleava is putting on a show down there in UCLA. Early on, it sounds like him and Tino Sunseri are working out very well together as OC and quarterback. I like this kid. I really do think he has unique talent. I understand the noise is going to be crazy, and there's always going to be stuff around that, and a lot of it is well-founded. I'm not necessarily saying you're wrong for criticizing this kid in the way that he went about business this offseason. What I am saying is he's still very talented. There's still a ton of potential that he can unlock, a big-time reason that people were looking at Tennessee saying they can maybe take a big-time step forward this year with him at quarterback. He's a very talented kid, obviously needs to take steps forward when it comes to pushing the ball down the field accurately, but if he can do that, he has a lot of incredible tools, and I don't think UCLA is going to do anything remarkable this year. I do think he ups their potential and ups their ceiling quite a bit. Also, Quasi Gilmer seems to be kind of like the wide receiver to watch around there. If Nico can put it together, then I think this is a team that can make a bowl game and then maybe in 2026 do something a little bit more special in the Big Ten if he can put it all together and obviously keep some of the off-the-field stuff to a minimum. Over at LSU, it sounds like they really like this defense, and that's a scary thing to hear. If you're an LSU fan, I think you love to hear that, obviously, but at the same time, you're thinking in the back of your head, we've heard that quite a few times, and it hasn't quite worked out. But Mansour Deline is someone that is showing out. He is absolutely cornerback 1 right now, is making play after play in fall camp. It sounds like Bernard Gooden is a guy to watch, a USF transfer at defensive line. Very talented kid, absolutely someone that will factor in. And then A.J. Halsey, another guy on the back end, a safety over there from Houston. Very, very good ball skills with this guy, and it sounds like he's making that known very early on. This defense is taking shape the way that you would need it to. Obviously, Harold Perkins is going to come into the mix playing the star position. It sounds like things are going relatively well there, but that's still very much up in the air, as is a lot of stuff around Harold Perkins right about now. You know what you have in Whit Weeks. That's not going to be a question. You know what you have in a couple other guys on this defense, but these transfers are always going to be huge, and those three guys, Deline, Gooden, and Halsey, seem to be kind of the standouts on that defense right now. Obviously, though, they need a little bit more, but any nice news out of the LSU defense, I think, is great news for any LSU fan out there. Also, Nick Anderson, the OU receiver that came over, sounds like he's being very, very incredible. During fall camp, he was a great fit for this offense when they picked him up in the portal, and I don't know if he's going to be the number one guy. Aaron Anderson, Barry, and Brown are also doing incredible things, but it does go to show that LSU's wide receiver core is as deep as it gets, and I think those top three guys, between Nick Anderson, Barry and Brown, and Aaron Anderson, are going to be a really, really special trio. And then just for fun, you have Chris Hilton as well that is playing really, really good football. So if they can put that wide receiver core together, which I think they will, they're going to be more than fine offensively. For defense, they were 53rd last year in points per game allowed. If they get up to number, let's say 27, 23, somewhere in that range, they're going to be a team that can win the national title. I promise you that. And frankly, I think they might jump a little bit higher than that, maybe even into the top 20s, which might be a little bit bold, but I really like what they're doing defensively, really like the groups, and I think Blake Baker can put something pretty special together this year down there in Baton Rouge. Notre Dame wide receiver room looks really good, and obviously that is something that Notre Dame fans have been waiting to hear for quite some time, but Malachi Fields and Will Pauling coming in from Virginia and Wisconsin respectively, huge players, and you're getting great returns early on in camp, especially Will Pauling seems to be the guy that's really showing out there. Jaden Greathouse is someone I love. I really do think he's going to be able to develop into a very, very good talent for them. Jordan Faison, obviously, has been playing a little bit of lacrosse in the offseason, but still a very talented guy that you won't have to rely on as much this year, which is very, very helpful for that room. They're going to need a pass game. There's no doubt about that. When you saw it last year when they were going through the CFP and beating some of those elite teams that people doubted that they could beat, it was a lot because Riley Leonard would make those couple of big-time passes. Jaden Greathouse would make a couple of big-time plays in those games, totally changed the complexion of that offense and opened up the run game just enough for them to have success against a Penn State or have success against a Georgia in some of those big games. It really came down to a couple of big-time passes. They're going to need that this year, and it feels like the wide receiver room is in a much better spot than it was a year ago. For Texas, these injured running backs are coming back very, very strong. CJ Baxter is the one you're going to want to watch very closely. He seems to be ahead of schedule. Obviously, this is not something that they're going to rush. He did have a big-time knee injury a year ago. They are not going to push him back into action until he is fully ready. I can almost promise you that. But it sounds like he seems to be really close to ready. Now, I think there is a world where we see him in week one. We'll probably see him just a little bit. I don't think we'll see a ton of him, if I'm being totally honest. I think they'll try to break him in during that 3-game stretch leading up to the Florida game where you have a little bit of time to get him ready, where he's not getting hit quite as hard by some of these teams. So I do think he's going to take just a little bit of time to get underway, but he seems to be ahead of schedule right now. The earlier they can get him back on the field, this could be a very, very special rush attack. And then Christian Clark was the other one that went down last year during fall camp. He seems to be close to 100%. He did not have as bad of an injury as CJ Baxter. It sounds like he is getting involved pretty early on. He could be used in a number of ways out of the backfield. And if they have all four of those guys healthy, between CJ Baxter, Trey Wisner, Jarrett Gibson, and Christian Clark, they can use all four of those guys in all four different ways, and that's going to be a really, really fun thing for Sark to do. Obviously, he likes to have kind of his bell cow back, but they got options in that backfield, especially if these two guys can come back, get fully healthy, and then get back on the field and have the impact that they're capable of, which for CJ Baxter could be an All-American type impact. And then Conrad Hussey was dismissed from the Florida State football team this past week. It sounds like it came with an altercation between him and a position coach. And it sounds like Conrad Hussey is not remotely the only person to blame in this case. It sounds like the position coach is to blame as well, obviously. But at the end of the day, he has been dismissed from the team. This is a guy they kind of needed. Now, he likely was not going to be a starter on the back end for this team. Played 10 games a year ago. They obviously brought in some transfers on that back end, so he was likely going to be a rotational piece for them. Florida State can't lose anyone. That's the reality of their situation right now. They have to be able to put the best 11 guys on the field. This guy would have been a part of that at certain times. So, a devastating decision for this kid. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely something that could alter the future for this kid. Hope he can get his head on straight. Hope he can find a new place to play and, continue his football career on better terms. But a tough ending to his time at Florida State, and it'll be a really, really interesting thing to watch throughout this season, both for Florida State, how it affects the way they go about business, and where Conrad Hussey officially lands at the end of all this, because he's probably going to have to sit and wait until that winter portal to fully get in, and that's going to be quite a bit of time to wait to play football. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, just kind of one of those blurbs that came across my Twitter feed that I felt like we had to talk about. Definitely does hurt Florida State's ability on defense and just hurts their variability, just hurts their ability to have a couple of misses and still be pretty successful. Now you probably can't miss on just about anyone on that back end. So a lot of stuff going on in fall camp. A couple of those quarterback battles will be decided this weekend. I think Notre Dame will likely be decided this weekend. Whether or not we get an answer there, I don't know. Ohio State, kind of the exact same thing. I think they're going to know who their guy is by the time Monday rolls around. I don't know if we'll know until they play Texas. But at the end of the day, going to be awesome to watch all of these unfold. I think with those quarterback battles that have been decided, I trust Kalen DeBoer. And if he's picking Ty Simpson, I have no doubts that Ty Simpson is going to be a good quarterback. I think the pickup there at Boston College is one that might not grab national headlines, but in 2026 could be a huge one with Dylan Lonergan up there with Bill O'Brien. But we'll get into all the craziness that happens over the weekend and maybe some more quarterbacks that have been decided on Monday. But let's take our first break, and when we come back, we have an AP poll. We have the AP preseason poll. I want to get into just a full reaction of it, some overrated, underrated teams, and then some national title implications from this AP poll right after this, so stick with us.